who has been in custody for literally years without knowing what his fate is to be. So, I mean, as you can see, man has been, I think he's the longest serving prisoner without trial. He has not been trial, has not been on trial for extradition charges. And as I said again, I'll say that if there's anything, bring him to the court, prove it, you know, if he has done anything, or you just release him if he is not guilty.
Brian, listening to this, and of course a lot of you at home watching this would say, how can we, you know, how can this be? We're in England, it's 2011. How can a person be detained? Normally that's a punishment once you've been found guilty, without having had the chance to even prove whether he's innocent or guilty. How can we be in that situation today?
I mean, I think the case raises a number of very important issues. The one about fighting extradition, where somebody is accused by a foreign government, in this case America, of being involved in terrorism, where the authorities believe that the person could be dangerous and therefore should be detained pending that decision on extradition, where the legal process takes so long that it results in somebody who has never had a chance to prove their innocence being detained for 6 years. Now, this has really serious implications because, you know, the police and the security services want people from the community to come forward with information when they have their suspicions about people behaving strangely within the community. But when people see that them coming forward with that information could result in their friends or family or people they know being detained for 6 years without a trial, this will really make them think before coming forward with what could be very vital information for the security of everybody.
So you would say, from a security angle, this makes no sense as well. And yet
I think it is potentially, it is very dangerous in terms of the relationship between the community and the police and the security services. People are far less likely to come forward with information. But going back to the police officers, the really worrying thing here, and we had it in another case recently, where the Independent Police Complaints Commission, who investigated the case, and then they pass a file to the Crown Prosecution Service, who decide whether police officers should be prosecuted. They decided not to bring a prosecution in this case initially. It was only after Barber brought a civil action and the Commissioner of the Police in London admitted liability that they then decided there should be a trial, which is why it's taken so long for the officers to face a trial. And the more years you have to wait for a trial, the less likely you are to have justice.
And again, we heard about bags of evidence disappearing, so many strange goings on. And despite all of this, I believe the solicitor of Barber Ahmed is still saying that the IPCC should now, whatever they've been, you know, they've been let down up to this point, allegedly, that they should now step in because this isn't over. There's a misconduct review about to be carried out. How are people going to have confidence in the police after this, do you think? Regardless of what the court decision is, or perhaps because of it, do you think people will now trust the police more, or do you think that there's a journey to go there?
I think it's very difficult because the evidence that has now come out as a result of the criminal trial, notwithstanding a not guilty verdict, will raise doubts in many people's minds, particularly when they take into account the police commissioner has admitted liability for the assault, and looking at the officer's previous track record. It does raise questions then in people's minds about whether police officers can ever face justice in the UK. And it's not exclusively in this sort of case. We had a newspaper seller, Ian Tomlinson, who died after contact with the police. And again, the IPCC, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, and the Crown Prosecution Service decided not to prosecute the officer until there was an inquest. And when the inquest revealed vital new evidence, then and only then did the Crown Prosecution Service change their mind, as they did in this case, to prosecute the officers. We have to ask, why is the IPCC and the CPS not making those decisions first time round?
And just finally, before I come back for the final word to Barber's father, what's the worst case scenario for these police officers? Say now, if we are going to see some confidence from the public in the police and for justice to be seen to be done. What options are there? What are the possibilities from this review?
Well, it appears that the police are doing their own internal disciplinary investigation. The Independent Police Complaints Commission have the power to take over that decision-making process and to put the officers onto a disciplinary hearing within the police service. All that would mean, and then the maximum penalty there would be for the officers to be sacked. The problem is, when a senior panel of police officers are deciding whether to sack the officers, again, they have to use the same standard of proof that the jury used in the criminal trial, i.e. that it was beyond reasonable doubt that the officers used excessive force against Babar. And so I am not very optimistic that the public's confidence in the whole process is going to be repaired at the end of this case.
Well, coming back to you, you've seen your son detained, not able to answer to the charges, not able to prove guilt or innocence, having been assaulted and yet being told by a jury that it was not illegal. Where does this leave you as a family now, and what kind of support would you be looking for at the moment?
As I said, that since this trial is over, but there are certain questions like that probe thing they were talking about, and there were no recording devices in the room where it was beaten or in the van and all that. So there are certain questions, and they have been saying all sorts of things. Babar did this, Babar did that, and all that. That is one thing of concern, and secondly, what I emphasize most is that his extradition thing, because he, as a British subject, as I said again earlier, that he should be tried here, and we are quite hopeful that what the judge has said, what the public is saying, and we have got a very good support, and people.
So the family is campaigning, the
yeah.
fight goes on. If people want to support you, how would they get in touch?
Well, there's this www.freebabarahmad.com. That is our website, and they can go to that website and they can find all the detail of what they can do. And as I said, they can talk to their own MPs. And well, it has been going on for a long time. And after this case, although once again, although the police has won the case, but there are still questions that that £60,000 was given to him, and the Metropolitan Commissioner they did admit that we did this and that. So they don't add up.
Yes.
One more thing I would like to say here, that although it may be slightly irrelevant, that when you go to court, everybody holds the holy book and they say that I will tell the truth, nothing but the truth. But if both parties are telling the truth, then who is telling the lie?
Well, on that note, Babar Ahmed's father has shown great dignity, and he's saying that despite the verdict, the family is pleased that they did have a day in court and Babar was able to explain his point of view. We hope the day comes when he can face the other charges in an open court, regardless of what the outcome may be. And thank you for joining us today. The case certainly opens more questions than it answers, and no doubt we'll be revisiting this issue in a future show. But do join us for the second half. We'll be turning to a very different issue about Muslim women.